More to Marketing. Welcome to More to Marketing, the podcast that explores marketing, product, and everything business. I'm your host today, Susan Walsh, and today we're going to be discussing what you do if you're in a fantastic situation and in the position where you may have to actually scale up your business. Today I have Simon, the founder of Stampix. Starting his career as an engineer, he found a moment in time where there was a gap in the market and he could actually flex some of his entrepreneurial passion. So now he runs a global empire that partners businesses with photography. And doing this brings joy to millions and millions of users. Welcome, Simon. Could you share a bit more about yourself?
Hi, Susan. Nice to be here. Thanks so much for that lovely intro. An empire is a little bit of an overstatement, I would say, but nonetheless, thanks.
I don't think so. You're well on your way. So tell us a bit more about you and a bit about your journey.
Yeah, great. So I'm Simon. I'm the founder of Stampix. I started a company 8 years ago already. Time flies, doesn't it?
Oh, that is fast.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I was in a completely different space and mindset back then as an engineer. You're trained to calculate risks and avoid them, and then as an entrepreneur, you have to embrace them and get to risk because that's inherent to any entrepreneurial venture. So yeah, it was at that moment when in time when I became a father, which is of course a big moment for any man or woman to become a mother, of course. And I realized that taking all these pictures of my newborn, I wasn't even printing them. And you have to know, Susan, we have a family background in photo printing.
Oh,
My
wow.
my grandfather launched back in the 60s the local equivalent of Kodak, so a local photo finishing company.
Yep.
It
It's in your soul.
Yes, exactly. So it was back in the 60s when, that market was still emerging. It became a pretty big company at some point, the number two in Europe. But then, as everybody knows, the photo printing was one of the first industries to be disrupted by digital in the early 2000s. And so we witnessed that, me as a young lad back then, just in the front row. So it was a striking moment back then when I realized, like, wow, I'm not even printing photos and I have so many photos stuck on my phone. That business model has to be broken, or at least there's an opportunity there. And we saw that opportunity by partnering with brands who could offer the photos, the photo prints as a gift. At that point, we still had a completely different business model in our heads, as it usually goes. So we had to pivot towards where we are right now. But that's how it all started. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I love that it's all about connecting a brand with a joyous moment. So there's that positive feeling and emotiveness that comes with that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Because at that point already, maybe we were a bit ahead in 2016 because digital was still emerging for many big brands, but it's still, for us as consumers, it's already felt very habitual. And there was already an overload a little bit, I think, in terms of social media and digital ads tracking you, things of that nature. So we figured that the printed touch point would come back, or was it at least a nice addition to an omni-channel mix? Uh,
Mm.
and so we started pitching that. We started going to brands. We built a little smartphone app where consumers could log on with the chance to upload their pictures and receive them for free. But we would, of course, have to match that demand with the supply of advertisements, which we would then target on these photos. So we did throttle it. So you would have to wait until there was a print code, we called it, available. And so we built this little community of people who were eager to print their photos again, just like ourselves and the gut feeling we had. And it was nice to see that community grow organically. We didn't have to raise any money. We didn't have to do any advertising. It was just word of mouth.
Amazing.
And they would sometimes have to wait a month for their prints, but they didn't mind because we kept that promise realistically. So we didn't promise them to get it delivered next day or next week. It was like, as soon as we've got an advertiser, you'll be able to receive your prints.
Exactly. No, I love that model where it's just naturally grew itself But then along this journey, you would have gotten to a point where it grew so big, and this is where scaling came in for you. So, are you able to share a bit more about what scaling meant for you and your business and how you identified you were at that stage and what you did?
Yeah. So first, in that business model, which I explained, which is what we call a two-sided market model, you've got advertisers on one hand and you've got users on your app. We identified it was very hard to scale that model because we've got a physical thing to print and ship, and there's a cost associated. So that's unlike a Facebook or any advertising medium. They can scale the user base, and then any advertisement revenue is happily welcomed. But if it's big, nice. So if it's not big, you first go for the users. So that's a clear priority. We didn't have that luxury because we had to keep those users happy by printing. To have them to receive the prints, we need to find the advertisers. So that put an enormous pressure on scaling up because we saw the user side scaling, but not the advertiser side. Because they want to see reach, they want to see low costs, they want to see a bunch of things we couldn't offer them. So that's when we did a pivot. And I think that's crucial for any early venture, is to have the flexibility to pivot. So one of the leading telecom operators here in Europe, Orange, we were talking about a campaign, and we were very proud. We had like 25,000 people on our app, active users, but they weren't particularly impressed with that number, of course. From a reach or advertising perspective, it's really peanuts.
Well, that's only because of who they were in the market at that time, because
also
Orange
true.
was, I think, number one then, or very
In
close
Europe.
to number one.
Yeah, they may well. They then, moved on to be different subsidiaries in different markets. They still exist today in Belgium, where I live, and in France. So they suggested a different approach, is pushing this as a gift for their loyal members. And so that's when we entered the loyalty space. But the product did not fit that market at all, because we had an app where we owned the data. And of course, Orange didn't want us to run away with their data. They wanted a web-based. So they also didn't want to push another app to their already app users who are on the loyalty app. So they just wanted a link, which was white labeled. So not too much Stampix brand in there, just as a provider, we could be in there. And then most importantly, the data would be owned by them. So that's when we pivoted to a purely B2B model, and things took off to where we are right now in 8 different markets with different telecom, energy, insurance companies, in travel, quite some nice traction. And we can focus now purely on the B2B side, which is so much nicer. We did keep that app on the background. We didn't throw it all away. We put a payment button in there and like, hey, if you want prints, we're going to try and offer them to you at an affordable price point. And so that's actually now resurfacing again. So you see, eventually there's some sort of a circle, because the app has now been extended with a web shop, because we've reached so many consumers. They're also coming to us actively asking, like, I want to order more prints. Where can I do this? So it would be a bit weird if you then don't have a solution for that in place. So, but we've split both businesses completely. So it's B2C and B2C, but different approaches.
And I'd also assume that with your old business, because you're getting economies of scale now with the print going through with your white label, you're able to offer a quite attractive price for those prints, which is why you're seeing that business start to grow organically over there again, because you're able to bring that pricing model through.
Exactly. That's the benefit, and the good thing about economies of scale. Yeah.
It's like a little cherry on top, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I love it. And how did you identify then, after your pivot, that you needed to scale and do even more? Because naturally you've got these big companies coming in, but you've got a white label, which makes it semi easier to do because you're not creating it from scratch every time, but there's still effort involved. And then you've also, I'm assuming then, with entering all these different regions, how do you source all these different printers?
Yeah, great question. So first thing, very important, we are only doing the white label and the technological layer. We're not printing anything ourselves. So we're integrating with print partners who do the printing, the shipping, the handling on behalf of us. So that's the first challenge. You've got to find those suitable partners. We've developed a process for that to identify them. Obviously, price, quality. But the good thing is there are global providers. In our case, we print on HP. So that's a
Mm,
global brand. We can go through their brand team and they can put us in contact with references in Spain, Italy, Australia, anywhere.
perfect.
Yeah. So that's a first pretty easy thing to do is to reach out to them. But still, then they also want to see volume. They also have busy days. They also have strategic priorities. They're not waiting for a scrappy startup with a completely new concept and no clients yet to be, to spend 2 weeks integrating with them. So,
Mm.
so it's still a bit of a hassle, but it's doable. That bit is doable.
And the
Um,
great thing is you've got some good case studies from other regions now that as you're scaling up and moving to different areas, you might feel like you are that scrappy little startup going to this new region. But when they see the numbers and can even talk to their own team members, because it's part of that same ecosystem in this example, you're not scrappy. You are building something, and you are, as I said before, building that empire.
That's right. That's right. No, it's true. We have beautiful logos and reference cases, and that's usually what gets them across the line to take that investment, take that bet that it's also gonna reach heights in their region, and that they're gonna reap the fruits of that. So that's the operational side. Um, the the real challenge, of course, getting the business development side without or with boots on the ground rolling. So that's the what we're currently focusing on a lot. And but it's working quite well. Again, for those same reasons, we have the logos. There is a nice international community of loyalty marketeers, and they're very open to speak, to exchange, to
Mm.
showcase studies on the conferences that are around. So I try to take part in most of those.
Mm. Networking can't be undervalued.
Exactly. Maybe another interesting thing we had to figure out is which markets you go after, because
Oh, yes. Where are they
in
at
our
in their
country,
stages? Yeah.
exactly. I always say entrepreneurship is allocating resources and mitigating risks, and so that's really one about allocating resources. You don't have endless resources nor time, so you got to pick the right markets.
Mm-hmm.
And so we made a matrix on countries where, with the size of their loyalty market, the maturity of that market, the number of inhabitants, because the downside of Belgium is that we're only 10 million or 11 million. So
Yeah.
tiny little market with three languages and a lot of different cultural. It's an interesting country, but it's not necessarily giving you the biggest revenues or reach.
Mm.
So we really quickly had to go outside of our borders because, as you know, and I think it's the same in Australia, you only have uh, a limited number of telcos or insurance companies or uh,
Exactly.
energy companies. So it's really, once you've spoken to all of them and some of them buy, some of them don't. Also, they don't want all the competitors to have that same loyalty reward in their offering. So you can't just flirt with everyone.
Mm.
Uh, so that's why we had to immediately look across the border. And so we made that matrix. And one of the elements that's also important for us is the quality and the speed of the postal service.
Mm. That's extremely important. You don't want
Yeah,
soggy photos arriving or crumpled up photos.
exactly. So South Africa, for example, great market, a lot of loyalty going on, big market, but the SAPO, the South African Postal Service, is not reliable. We did a test
Mm.
there. We shipped 100 parcels, and I think only five arrived or something. So like
Oh, that's
really
shocking.
unreliable. Yeah, and then you have to go to courier services, which are way more expensive, putting a lot of pressure on your capabilities and your price for value. So yeah,
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing to consider and definitely a key factor when you're looking at scaling up is what impacts does it have for your downstream because you're partnering with hopefully quality partners like you just said the postage because you want to make sure that the deal that you've made you keep that promise.
exactly.
Is there any other key factors that should be considered as part of it? Because we know costs are always going to be there, and we've talked a bit about resources. But are there any other key factors that you find really important that even other people should consider for their business?
If you're in a situation with recurring revenue or a SaaS model, we're not purely SaaS. We're doing the prints, but we've got the technological layer, which is sort of a SaaS model. Then I think at least you have to have a solid base of recurring revenue before
Mm.
scaling. And often in times, you want to move on to the next logo, the next client, and we definitely had that hunch as well, or that need a little bit in the early days. But making sure you've got a solid stream, reliable clients that are generating recurring revenue, and having those metrics healthy before scaling up, I think would be key advice.
Oh, definitely. I think that's one reason why a lot of startups unfortunately fail is they don't predict the costs that could be associated, and they've got nowhere to go to get any more funds because of wherever they get to in their business model when they're going out. That's why a lot of them probably disappear, because they don't realize either the audience, the product, or the costings behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
What other key challenges and common challenges have you seen when scaling up, and how have you overcome them or seen others overcome them?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of entrepreneurs are talking about the need for local people to do
Mm.
B2B sales. We've seen examples of companies that were able to do it from within their own market. But we're also experiencing that as a key challenge, is for us to do business in the UK or Spain without having a local entity, requires us to have a lot of credibility.
Mm.
And so we're still trying to uh, work locally, but locally, I mean from our domestic team with full-time employees. But we did find a model with local partners, and partners could be agencies, could be loyalty specialists, could be people with a network who know the ins and outs of those brands because they're listening to the radio, to the television. They know what's making their heart tick when
Yep.
something's going on in the world of loyalty. That's really hard to do when you're in Belgium.
Mm.
Um, but building that network has been a solution, but also a challenge at the same time because you have to maintain those partners engaged. You have to somehow try to get meetings at the end of the day to be able to present your solution.
Mm.
And so, yeah, that's the approach we're currently doing, is building that partner network combined with going to local conferences. There's a lot of conferences going on in the loyalty space, and I try to attend all of them and network as much as possible.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? The loyalty space. Myself personally, I also cross into loyalty, but I have a background in product and marketing, hence my podcast, everyone. Of course, you guys know. But I see that there's opportunities for people like yourself to get in front of more of the CMOs or the CEOs and attending more of those type of conferences, because I find that you need to go where the decision makers are in a lot of cases. And sometimes the loyalty people within the team don't have the purse strings. So to get in front of the right people is also a challenge as well when scaling up, to be able to get in front of where you need to go, to be able to have those conversations, to get that new partner on board or to get that new client on board or get into that new region. So by having that network, that helps some people get over those challenges. And that's by, like you said, getting out there and talking more.
Indeed. Get out the building. I think it's a famous quote by a startup guru. I think Steve Blank is the guy who
Get out of the
said it.
building. I love it.
Yeah.
But how does scaling up impact things like customer acquisition, retention, just overall customer experience as well? Because I'm assuming when you start doing the scaling up process, it can actually be a bit disruptive.
It definitely is. And just like your own retention has metrics have to be solid before you even consider scaling. I think building that operational layer is also crucial. In our case, that's integrating with local print partners, but it's also things like customer support, having the right tool, the right people. And nowadays, that space is moving so fast with AI. and capabilities of translating. But still, that's really important that somebody in Spain is being helped in their own native language.
Mm.
So you got to think of all those things and have it all right before you start acquiring customers. Yeah.
And I think with the retention piece as well, I've seen a lot of companies during the scale up, they just forget their active base or the ones that were with them at the beginning. And it could be a reoccurring service or some kind of product that they come back to time and time and again. I think then another thing is also really important when you're scaling up is to ensure that you acknowledge them, reward them if possible along the way, which is part of where loyalty does come in and plays an important part. But that they're not put at a disadvantage is probably my key point out of this, because that can lead to the negative sentiment. And you don't want that if they've been having such a great time until you kicked it up a level.
Yeah.
I know that one thing I see with some startups is the customer service falls apart. So before you could get through in 1 minute, now you're waiting an hour. Those things that you can tinker with and hopefully fast identify to solve. I think that's something that a lot of scaling up needs to remember, that there's always going to be fine tuning that happens no matter what it is. And sometimes you might scale up and have to pivot again because it's not quite right. So being open to that too.
Yeah. And being open to revisit your technological stack is also important. Yeah. Finding the right tool is not so easy because there's so many tools out there.
Oh, they're like shiny little whistles, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Every 2 weeks there's a new tool that seems a little bit better than the one you just picked. So yeah, every once in a while doing a thorough assessment, and we really did like with a matrix with pros and cons and pricing and testing and everything to get the right customer service tool. And yeah, we currently have Help Scout, which turned out to be a really good choice.
That's great. And again, that testing and not being afraid that it is wrong and pivoting when you need to or changing it out. It's so important that businesses identify that and do make a change and not just stick with it hoping it will change in 6 months' time when they know in their gut it won't.
Yeah.
So talking more about technology, what is the role that technology plays in facilitating these scaling up processes?
Yeah, you got to think about things like loading on the browser. These things,
Mm.
depending on if you're building a web application like we do, a white label one, of course, it has to load fast. And so, depending on how your architecture is designed, that can already be a very early challenge early on. So, in our case, we work with AWS. And so it's relatively easy to configure it in such ways that data is stored locally and that we've got loading times that are acceptable in different markets. But that's a very pragmatic or a thing we had to figure out early on. A second thing is with the print partners and the postal services, delivery times, qualities. How do you maintain the quality that is advertised on your website or that people are talking about and rating? The same in a different market where there's different paper, different print partners. So we have strict specifications on which paper to use, which machines, which finishing. And then there's the postal service who has differences in delivery times. And then how do you get all the data to give a proper track and trace to that local person? But because at the end of the day, if you're in Australia and you print through our services, you don't care that it's a Belgian company and that it's AWS hosted and that it works with on HP as a print partner. So you don't know those things, you don't care about them. What you care about is how long it takes and how apt the communication around that delivery is.
Exactly. Managing those expectations and delivering
Exactly.
to it.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
about
So
that brand promise.
exactly. So that getting that right is essential and is very much driven by your choices in technology.
100% there. I've seen this found time and time again. I still remember in the Australian market when Click Frenzy first came, and they underestimated the volume that would go to their website. So it crashed and burned. And it took a while for them to recover that reputation. I still remember it at the time because I was involved in it as a actual company at the time. I wanted to pay the money to be part of Click Frenzy because I thought it was an awesome opportunity.
Mhm.
But that definitely was something that they underestimated the appeal. And I see that time and time and again with a lot of digital online sales for retailers that don't quite understand how much they're going to get. And I think
Mhm.
COVID demonstrated a lot of that as well.
Yeah, that definitely relates to our situation as well. We work with a number of big companies, huge databases, and so when they decide to do a big push, like a
Mm.
surprise fall, then we can have spikes of 100,000 people within just a few hours that are visiting our website and uploading heavy files, photos, sometimes 10, 15 at a time. So you can imagine that those are
Oh,
huge peaks. But that's why it's good to have work with a company like AWS and having it with Elastic's capabilities, so you can scale up and scale down, and it's completely serverless, and so you can sort of match the demand from the customer side.
yeah, no, it's definitely something key for anyone in the digital space that there can be services out there that can be flexible so they don't have to look into larger volumes. They can have it
Exactly.
smaller and then work with them when they've got the need and they know the need's coming.
Yes, indeed.
Now, I know you love scaling up businesses, but what excites you most when you're doing it?
I guess it's the idea that you have to know this is a personal one. I love traveling. So different cultures. I've been to Australia, to New Zealand, uh, beautiful countries. And so this way I'm sort of getting back into those countries that I once visited. Even if it would be South America countries, I mean, it just always brings great memories back. And so doing business there always excites me.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Spain for a year, so it's obviously a market that I would, just for personal reasons, love to break into.
I love it.
Yeah,
You've found a job that helps you with your travel to be able to enjoy the places you like. I love it. So
lovely.
now I know the pattern for all the regions you go to as well.
There's probably a link there as well. Yeah, but it is true that the loyalty space is very active in beautiful countries like Brazil, also amazing
Mm,
country, huge loyalty market. And last year there was the Loyalty and Awards conference in Rio de Janeiro, and so I took a plane there.
you
We
had
did
to,
a,
didn't you?
a little sponsorship, and I got on stage, and it resulted in a collaboration here in Australia. Well, with here for you. So yeah, that's how it goes, and it sort of proves that it's also the way to go as a business leader to really get out of your comfort zone and go into those markets, speak to people.
I love it. Now, I have a question I ask everyone, and the question is what brand, any brand in the world, best represents you and why?
Yeah, it's a great question again, and there's so many brands that I'm loyal to in behavior or loyal to in attitude, but not necessarily spend so much. But I think, and what I've always been very passionate about as since a kid is basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so the NBA, of course, is like the biggest dream of every young player. And so I think it's a brand on itself.
Mm-hmm.
They host all these different teams. They're very vocal on um, um, topics that are in society. They work a lot with the Black communities in the US. They've got a lot of European players that are now rising stars in the NBA. So it's still something, a space I watch closely, and that gives me a very warm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's why I chose that one as a brand.
I love it. And I love that it's not just a team, it's
Yeah,
the overall group of all teams together, which embodies what you feel. I actually really love that because
yeah.
it's easy to go, oh, Chicago Bulls or something like that. But no, I love that you've
Exactly.
thought about what it stands for too. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Now, I'm just going to do a quick recap. So, for me, scaling up is something that's a real interest, which is why I love talking about entrepreneurial topics. And in this particular example, we got to hear about today. Originally, it started off being a two-sided market model, but knowing that they needed to grow, how could they grow, where would they get their money source from? They identified that it would be more from business than from consumers. So pivoting and being open to that pivot and identifying areas to actually go and scale. And that's where loyalty really came in to help out. And then going down the lines of the white labeling, because that meant that they could open up to any business and really have a B2B model there. Looking and working with partners is part of the scaling up. So identifying that apps aren't necessarily the way to go, and being open to doing the web version so that it can be linked through to whatever application is being used by the partner means that it really is an integrated version on their side. Might not have the same brand appeal in this example for the owner of the brand Stampix, but it still gives them the volume that they're wanting and the connections that they're wanting to build out and the sales that they need to keep growing. And then they've got another logo to add to their deck to then sell on into other regions. But most importantly, scaling up, don't be afraid to seek partners. Partners can be the strength behind you if you get the right quality and you test and make sure that they're going to be able to do the brand fulfillment promise that you're wanting to achieve. So look for different ways that you can do printing in the local regions or shipping, that test it. Make sure about this. Don't commit to it without doing some true tests and learns with physical packages, if it's going to be that, or whatever it looks like for your particular business, because you need to be able to ensure that you can deliver what you say you're going to do. Case studies are magical things. As you're building and scaling along the way, make sure you take the time to document case studies, because they'll help you demonstrate when you go to new regions what you do and how you've done it and the success. And they take time to write and build up. So do take that little bit of time to do it as you're growing. Then you can pick and choose the case studies that best suit what you're trying to do. Networking is huge. Networking can help you get many places. So take the opportunity to talk to others, even in your same sphere, because people do generally want to help people. So take the time to make those connections, follow up on those connections, and even if you can, get out and see them. Get out of the building, go say hi, knock on those doors, have those coffees or gelatos, whatever it is. Now, when you do start looking at scaling, make sure you're looking at things like the opportunity, the risk, the resources, and make your own matrix on those and see where it fits in and makes sense. So you're making smart business decisions, because all resources, whether money, humans, time, are limited. So ensure that you really do think about it and put the right due diligence in. Some key factors that you could consider is the downstream impact, postage. Do you have a recurring revenue that if things didn't go well, you can pivot backwards as well? So make sure you really take heed of those things, because you want to have a healthy business before you do your scale up, or else you're just going to be making potentially more poor business decisions. You'll be very lucky if you do succeed, though, if you've got poor money and you're still going for it. But hey, your business, up to you. A key area that may be worth looking at when you're going down the partner area, and a challenge for many businesses currently, is many new markets want you to have a local person. So that's where partnerships, agencies, the like may come in. So don't be afraid to look at those, because they may work out to be that extra sweet sauce that you need to be able to make your business successful there. Check your assets, particularly when it comes to your tech stack. Tech stacks are super important. If you're building your own, make sure it's secure. If you're working with others, do those testings. Make sure that you've got a quality tech stack that can be robust, but also work with your partners and isn't too much of a limitation. Because everyone has to do a bit of work when you integrate, but you don't want it to be overwork. Things to consider, though, when you are scaling up and you're very excited. One of the most basic ones that I see fail, but you can get ahead of it if you write this down now: website loading. Ensure that you're working with a website partner that can go up and down for your needs, so that you don't, when you're doing your scaling, it doesn't impact the quality of what you're creating for your customers or end users. Because that's the last thing you want people to experience, is a site that's just shut down and they can't get to forever and they don't know and don't bother going back. You could have potentially lost them forever. And quality. My last point, I promise everyone: quality. Do tests, check, make sure you've got your specs, because in the end of the day, when you're scaling up, you want to keep that brand promise. You want to be able to ensure you're going to deliver what you say you're going to deliver and how, even if you've got all these new partners involved. So test it, stress it, and also do it in real life as well, just to be sure. Have I missed anything, Simon?
Thanks so much, Susan. That's a brilliant overview. Maybe a final thought is that I think the entrepreneur journey is more predictable than most people think. And there's a brilliant article that I think yearly, I look back into it, describing 9 different stages, and maybe it's something that I can share with you, and you can post in the notes or something.
That
But
would
it's
be
called
fantastic.
"Entrepreneur Journey is More Predictable Than You Think." It's by Daniel Priestley, and I think it's a great read for any entrepreneur who's like going through those different stages early on to eventually building an empire.
Like you are. I love it. We'll add that to the show notes for everyone to catch up on. Also, I'll add all Simon's details there too, as well as Stampix. For anyone there that's wanting to have a fantastic solution where you can bring fond memories with your branding on the back, definitely reach out because they are gorgeous. Thank you again so much, Simon. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Sue.
And everyone else, don't forget to add more to marketing to your playlist so you don't miss out on any episodes with fabulous guests. More to marketing.